Hey everyone, this is Jungkook. Before we start, I want to know where you're listening from. Drop your country in the comments below. Last night didn't leave a mark on my skin, but it left one on my mind. It wasn't a shove in a parking lot or someone yelling in the street. It was smaller than that and heavier than that at the same time. It was a sentence at a dinner table that landed like a stone in water and kept sinking long after we paid the bill. I'm still tracing the ripples, still asking myself why it hurt the way it did, why it lit up all the alarms that have been sleeping inside me, why a single opinion from someone I love could feel like a verdict delivered to my future. The word you've seen floating around online is hate. I don't think that's the right word, but I understand why it travels so fast. Hate is dramatic. Hate is simple. Hate is a headline. What I felt from my mom wasn't a headline. It was a complicated silence before and after a sentence that said, in a voice as careful as a surgeon's hand, that she didn't approve of the woman who makes me laugh in the car when I'm too tired to think, the woman who hears the roughness in my voice before I do and hands me water without a word. My mom said she was worried. She said she didn't trust intentions. She couldn't read. She said 1,000 soft, sharp things that all meant one. Please choose safety over surprise, control over risk, the known over the unknown, a calm shore over this girl who could be a storm or an ocean or both, depending on the day. I could have nodded, swallowed it whole. Let the old habit take over the good son habit. The quiet son habit, the habit that learned to solve problems by being efficient and agreeable. I could have told myself that harmony is the highest good and that my happiness is a smaller candle than the lantern of the family. I could have decided that peace with my mom matters more than the heartbeat I feel when my phone lights up with a message that just says, "Breathe, I'm proud of you." But there was something in me that didn't move. Something that refused to duck its head and make itself small. I just sat there calm, not because I had won anything, but because for the first time in a long time I wasn't trying to win. I was trying to be honest. Honesty isn't a loud speech. Sometimes it's a quiet boundary. Sometimes it's refusing to accept someone else's fear as your future. Sometimes it's saying, "I hear you," and meaning it, and still not changing your answer. I've learned something about boundaries. They don't protect you after the fact. They protect you before you're broken. And last night I realized I needed one I'd never drawn. Not between me and my mom, because love isn't a line on the floor, but between the fear that raised me and the love that waits for me if I'm brave enough to claim it. If you've ever been pulled between two loyalties that both feel sacred, you know this feeling. Your chest gets tight the way it does before a concert. When the lights go out and your body knows something big is about to happen. You look for a script and there isn't one. You try to remember how you've handled this before, and the truth is you haven't. Not exactly like this. It would be easier if there were a villain, if someone was obviously cruel, if I could point to a word or a text and say, "See, that's the wound." But there wasn't. There was love on the table, and there was fear sitting next to it, pretending to be love's older sibling. And there was me, old enough to know the difference and young enough to still want everyone to clap at the same time for the same song. I didn't go home to an empty room. I went home to messages from people who know how my silence sounds. Jimin sent me a voice note that was mostly air and a soft hyung at the end, even though he knows I'm the maknae, and I understood he wasn't labeling me, he was holding me. He's seen me at my most certain and my most confused. He has this way of listening to your breathing and telling you what you meant to say before you find the words. He didn't tell me what choice to make. He just said that people who really love you will wait by the door you're building, even if they don't understand where it leads, and that sometimes a boundary is just a door you refuse to leave unlocked for anyone who knocks loudly enough. Taeyong has his own language for love and fear. He sees in pictures before he sees in sentences. He told me once that sometimes a portrait looks harsh when you're standing too close. You have to step back to understand the colors. I didn't even ask, but my phone lit up with the photo he took of a streetlight drowning in fog. Not everything that looks cold is cold, he wrote. Sometimes it's just the air changing shape around the light. I think he was telling me that my mom's voice could hold love even when it sounded like frost. I think he was telling me to step back to find the frame that made the image make sense. Namjoon doesn't waste words. He builds bridges with them, and he hates when they collapse. He asked me what I was actually afraid of. Losing my mom's approval, losing the girl I'd chosen, losing the person I am when nobody is asking me to perform. I told him the truth, all of it. He said the map is simpler than it feels. If you make a choice to avoid fear, he said, you'll have to keep choosing it forever. If you make a choice to move toward love, fear will still show up, but it won't be the driver. He didn't tell me which love. He just reminded me that choosing out of fear is how you become a version of yourself that you don't even like being around. Yoongi called late, which for him is early, because he lives just left of the clock. He didn't give me sympathy, he gave me clarity. People think control is love, he said. It isn't. Control is what we reach for when we don't trust ourselves. Your mom doesn't need to trust your girlfriend. She needs to trust who you are when you're with her. He paused. Do you like the person you are around her? I answered without thinking. Yes. He breathed out as if we had finished the song and said, then the song is good. Don't change it for an audience member who walked in late. Hoseok sent sunlight in text form. He didn't say much either. Just, you've always danced better when you're not staring at the mirror. The mirror doesn't clap. The music does. I read it twice and laughed, which I hadn't done since the bill hit the table, and I realized this conversation wasn't one I could dance out of. There's something about joy that feels like permission when you're drowning in opinions. Joy reminds you that life isn't a courtroom. It's a stage and a kitchen and a long road at night with your favorite song turned up enough to feel it in your bones. Sukjin, who knows what to say when the world gets too complicated, told me to cook. Soup, he said. Simple soup. Garlic, green onions, patience. While it simmers, decide what you can say in one breath without lying. I stood in the kitchen late and watched water turn into home, and I found the sentence I could carry into every room without dropping it. I love you, and I love her, and those two truths aren't enemies unless I make them fight. I think a lot about the audience in moments like this, the people who don't sit at our table but pull up chairs in their minds and decide what we should do with our lives as if they're paying the bill. I don't say this with anger. I say it with recognition. Fame teaches people to mistake proximity for participation, to feel a right to the controls on somebody else's ship because they helped paint the hull and cheered when it sailed. I'm grateful for the cheering. I'm alive because of it. But I also know gratitude can be twisted into a leash if you don't name what it is and what it isn't. Gratitude is not a contract. It's not an agreement to live publicly owned. It's not a promise to date who you approve of, to sing only the verses you like, to grow only in directions that make sense to strangers. Gratitude is a thank you. It's a bow. It's a light left on in the window so you can see each other on stormy nights. It's not a key to the front door. So when people say my mom hates my girlfriend, I hear something else. I hear a culture that loves clean lines and sharp labels. I hear the internet's hunger for conflict. I hear the old voice in me that thinks love must pick a side to be real. But nothing true about my life fits into a headline. My mom doesn't hate, she fears. And fear has 1,000 costumes. Some look like anger. Some look like politeness, sharpened into a blade. Some look like silence that lasts just a second too long. When I take off those costumes, I see a woman who built her life on surviving storms and wants to make sure her son doesn't sail into one on purpose. I see her hands busy and generous, afraid of what they can't fix. I see love, clumsy and protective, trying to steer my ship with a map drawn in a different ocean. This is not me asking the world to pick a side. This is me picking a center. The center is simple. I get to be the person who chooses the people who teach me how to be more of myself. The center is responsibility. If I'm wrong, I will learn. If I'm right, I will grow. If I'm hurt, I will heal. If I'm loved, I will say thank you and mean it. The center is a boundary that isn't a wall. It's a garden fence with a gate that opens to kindness and closes to control, even when control knocks with a familiar voice. I replay the dinner in slow motion and fast forward the way I watch choreography when I'm trying to understand where the power comes from. The power didn't come from being louder than my mom, or smarter than the rumors, or stronger than the pressure. It came from not apologizing for existing the way I am when I'm with the person I chose. It came from refusing to translate my happiness into a language that made other people comfortable while erasing what it actually said. It came from remembering that no is not hostility, and yes is not surrender, and I love you isn't a magic spell that makes us identical. It's a promise to keep meeting in the middle without dragging each other to the edge. I didn't try to change my mom's mind. I tried to show her mine. I told her what the girl means to me in the plainest words I have. That she's gentle with the parts of me that never learned gentleness. That she knows when to joke and when to be quiet and when to hand me the water before I know I'm thirsty. That she doesn't ask for my time like a tax, but receives it like a gift and gives hers back twice as much. That she doesn't love the stage, she loves the person who stands on it when the lights go dark. I didn't list her qualifications for the role of my future like I was applying for permission. I just described the person I am when I'm with her and asked my mom if she recognized me. She did. She said I looked rested. She said my eyes were steady. She didn't say she was convinced. She didn't say she approved. But she let the conversation land without grabbing it by the tail and throwing it against the wall. And sometimes that is what progress looks like. Not a victory parade, just silence that isn't a punishment anymore. There were moments on the ride home when the guilt tried to put its hands on the wheel again. That old voice, be grateful, don't make waves, keep the peace even if it costs you your own. I asked it a question I learned from a friend who doesn't flinch in storms, who benefits when you betray yourself, not the people you're trying to please. They get a ghost who smiles and nods and disappears when it's time to be real. Not you. You lose the one life you're supposed to carry with both hands. Not the world. The world doesn't need more obedient sons who are brilliant in public and absent in private. The world needs men who learn how to love without performance, who can look their mothers in the eye and say, I'm your son and I'm my own person, and then prove both are true with the way they show up the next day. There's a photograph in my mind that I can't stop looking at. It isn't of the dinner or the street outside. It's of a younger me, the teenager tuning a guitar alone after everyone falls asleep, whispering lyrics under his breath because he's afraid of waking the house. He doesn't know yet how many people will hear that voice. He doesn't know how many opinions will come packaged with that attention. He doesn't know that love will sometimes arrive dressed like a test. But he knows something I forget when I'm tired. The point of all of this was never to become someone the world agrees on. The point was to keep becoming someone I recognize. Someone I can sit with in a quiet room without needing noise to prove I exist. So no, I don't believe my mom hates my girlfriend. I believe my mom fears that love will take me somewhere she can't follow, and she's trying to put speed bumps on a road that doesn't belong to her. I believe the internet loves the word hate because it's heavy and rolls downhill into clicks. I believe the truth is lighter and harder to hold. I believe love that asks you to erase yourself is not love. I believe love that asks you to tell the truth and stay awake is worth defending, even at a dinner table where the air feels colder than it should. I will keep listening. I will keep setting the table. I will keep bringing soup and the sentence I can say in one breath without lying. I will keep being a son who knows where he came from and a man who knows where he is going. I will not leave anyone behind who wants to walk with me. I will not carry anyone who wants to drive me from the passenger seat. I will choose the center again tomorrow and the day after and the day after that, because a center is not something you find once and frame on the wall. It's a practice. It's a rhythm. It's a way of standing when the room starts to tilt. And if you're sitting across from your own version of this table, if someone you love is telling you that your joy makes them nervous, that your choice makes them uneasy, that your future looks safer from a distance breathe, Ask yourself who you are with the person you're choosing. If you like that person, if you respect that person, if you can look him in the eye in a quiet room and not feel the need to apologize, then you have your answer. Not because the people who disagree are villains, but because you are allowed to drive your own life without putting a committee in the passenger seat to pass motions on every turn. Gratitude can ride with you. Community can ride with you. Your mother can ride with you, but your hands belong on the wheel. Your heart belongs in your chest. Your future belongs to the person who will actually live it. Tonight, I'm going to sleep with my phone face down and my window slightly open so the air can move the curtains like a slow wave. Somewhere in that darkness, my mom is folding laundry and trying to fold her worry into smaller pieces. Somewhere in that darkness, the girl I chose is reading a book she'll forget in a week and remembering the things I said I'd do when the schedule lightened. Somewhere in that darkness, the people I make music with are dreaming in their own languages of comfort and art and noise. And somewhere in that darkness, the younger me is tuning a guitar he hasn't learned how to play yet, and he's not thinking about the internet or headlines or approval. He's thinking about a melody that won't let go until he hums it into the room and lets it change the air. That's still the point. That's still the way. I'm gonna follow that sound, and I hope when the morning comes and the kitchen smells like garlic and green onions and patience, the people who love me can meet me there and taste what honesty actually feeds us when we give it time to simmer. Morning came like a careful apology, slow light filtering through the blinds, the kind of gray that asks for gentleness before it offers clarity. I didn't wake to alarms or headlines. I woke to the quiet weight of the room and the aftertaste of last night's words. The air had a memory, as if the window had been open all night and the breeze had been listening. It's strange how a single dinner can rearrange the furniture in your head. How a sentence can move a chair you've always stubbed your toe on and suddenly you're walking a new path you didn't plan to take. I lay still and let my heart beat slow until it matched the rhythm of the city almost awake outside. Somewhere in that rhythm I heard the echo of my mother's careful tone and the unnamed tremor underneath it. The tremor that always lives in parents who built a life by holding on tight and can't quite loosen their hands even when what they're holding has learned how to stand. I didn't check the phone first. I checked my breath. Sometimes that's the only thing you own that isn't up for negotiation. Inhale, count to 4. Hold, count to 4. Exhale, count to longer than you think you can. That's a small way to choose yourself before the world starts choosing you. When I did pick up the phone, the screen was a constellation. Some stars were familiar, some burned hotter than they should. There were messages from friends and the members and the people who orbit my life in wider circles, messages that meant well and messages that meant content. The word that had been thrown like paint on a wall overnight was there in all caps, messier than the truth and easier to share. Hate. It looked loud on the phone and small in the kitchen where soup had once simmered while I found a sentence. That contrast told me which reality was allowed to decide who I would be today. I needed motion. Not to run away, but to remind my body that it knows how to move through music, even when thoughts want to sit down and make a home out of worry. The studio was empty when I arrived. The mirrors asleep. The floor waiting like a promise. There's a comfort in turning the key and hearing a space wake up to you, recognizing your footsteps, accepting your weight. I stretched in the kind of silence that isn't empty. It's full of all the hours people have spent there trying to become the truest versions of themselves, one count at a time. I put a song on low. Not to dance to yet, but to let the room breathe with me. The bass was a heartbeat outside my chest. The melody a line I could follow if thinking got too loud. I watched myself in the mirror and didn't look for flaws. I looked for signs of life. Eyes steady, shoulders not up around my ears, a jaw that didn't want to clench. That was enough to begin. When the door opened, it didn't surprise me. The members have a way of arriving where you need them even when no message asks them to. It's not magic, it's practice. Years of reading each other's silences until they speak. There was no performance in their faces, no speeches, no rush to fix a problem that isn't a problem so much as a path We laid our bags down like people who know the ritual of making a room sacred again. When the world has tried to make it a courtroom, warm-ups took over. Ankles, knees, hips, wrists. The things that carry you, whether you notice them or not. That's the secret of surviving public storms. You keep faith with small joints and quiet rituals. Jimin's eyes asked a question he didn't say out loud, the kind that doesn't want an answer so much as permission to stand close enough to catch you if you lean. He took the corner by the speaker and adjusted the volume a little lower than usual, as if the day had sensitive ears. There's a tenderness in the way he calibrates space, measuring not just distance but temperature, making sure the room doesn't get too hot with opinions or too cold with withdrawal. That's a kind of leadership people forget to write about because it doesn't flex or post or trend. It protects. Taehyung drifted like fog into a place where reflection meets rhythm. He tapped the mirror once with his knuckle and then stepped back as if to say, look at yourself the way a painter looks at a subject, with curiosity instead of judgment. Sometimes he sees what the rest of us miss because he's willing to take one step to the left of where everyone stands. Today, that step felt like a gift. When everything in your life wants to be judged on a scale of right or wrong, it is revolutionary to look without grading. Namjoon leaned against the wall and let the room settle around him like a book that already knows where the ending is but isn't impatient to get there. He has a way of holding the hole in his head while giving his attention to the piece that's in front of him. Like he's conducting a conversation between now and later. He didn't put words into the space yet, which is sometimes the bravest thing a person who loves language can do. He let the drum beat prove that we were still here. Yoongi sat cross-legged and tied his shoelace like a ceremony. He moves slowly when the world is rushing, not to resist it, but to reset it. There are hours where efficiency is a kindness and hours where efficiency is violence. This hour needed slowness. He found the tempo without a metronome. Count of 4 for the inhale, count of 4 for the truth, count of 4 for the boundary that isn't meant to keep love out, but to keep fear from running the whole show. He didn't have to say any of that. He just breathed, and the room learned. Hoseok brought light with him, not the blinding kind, the kind you can live under without squinting. He clapped not to start us dancing, but to name the moment. Here, the clap said, we are here. Sometimes that's all a team needs to remember. Not the plan, not the threat, just the presence. Seokjin walked in last with something warm in a thermos, the kind of comfort you can pour. He handed it to whoever would take the first sip and then to the next. A circle of heat moving hand to hand until everyone's fingers remembered they belonged to bodies, not to screens. We didn't talk about headlines. We talked about counts. That's how artists keep from drowning when the ocean wants to drag them into endless conversation about things that are not their work. We marked the first 8 with a tenderness that surprised me. It felt like walking through a house after a storm and checking the walls with your palm, making sure the structure is still true. When the music came up, it wasn't an escape. It was a way of telling the truth differently. Bodies don't lie as easily as mouths. There is a way a torso tightens when you're performing an apology you don't believe in. A way shoulders round when you're trying to be smaller to fit in a frame that was never built for you. I was looking for those betrayals. I found fewer than I expected. Whatever last night had done to my mind, it had not convinced my body to hate itself for choosing love. In the pauses between songs, the phone hummed again. Managers needed answers I didn't have yet. Do we respond? Do we ignore? Do we amend the narrative with a cleaner version of the truth? The older I get, the more I understand that sometimes the bravest PR is the one that doesn't try to win the internet. It tries to preserve a human. We aligned on that quietly. Let the headline be loud somewhere else. Here, let the metronome be the loudest thing. It was a mercy to give the day that kind of shape. After practice, the city had fully woken. Outside the building, cameras hovered at polite distances that can become impolite in a heartbeat. The difference between respect and entitlement is often 3 steps forward and the tone change. I know that dance too well. I nodded. the universal sign for I see you, you see me. We both have places to be. Someone called my name with warmth that tried to turn into insistence. I gave the smallest shake of the head that still qualifies as a full sentence. No. I don't live in opposition to the world. I live in conversation with it. But conversations have to be mutual to be real. That's a lesson I keep learning. In the street and at the table and in the comments where strangers audition to be directors of a life they don't have to live through. The car was a small church. Windows up, road hum, the breath of a driver who knows when words help and when silence heals. Traffic slowed enough to show me all the faces of the city. A kid with a backpack too big for his body and a smile too big for his face. A couple arguing with their hands more than their voices. A grandmother resting her chin on her palm at a bus stop, watching a pigeon try to decide who it belongs to. I thought about belonging, about how easy it is to confuse ownership with care, to mistake control for love. That's not a criticism of anyone in particular. It's a map of a trap I don't want to fall into from either direction. If you love someone, you don't turn them into a project. If you love yourself, you don't let someone else's fear assign you destiny. At home, I cooked something I'd watched Seokjin make 100 times. Not because I was hungry, but because chopping green onions teaches your hands patience, even when your head wants to sprint. Garlic surrendered to the pan and filled the apartment with a smell that makes complicated things feel simpler. It's hard to believe in headlines when the kitchen smells like that. I poured this soup and left the second bowl empty on purpose. A chair for my mother, whether or not she walks through the door today. Sometimes love is just not locking the door. Sometimes it's locking it and leaving the key under the mat with a note. When you're ready, come in gently. My phone buzzed with a message from my father, short and sincere. He doesn't use many words, not because he can't, because he doesn't waste the ones that cost him. He said he knows there are storms that don't show up on weather apps and that he keeps a spare umbrella by the door anyway. That was his way of saying he is not a referee. He is a shelter. The relief that rolled through me wasn't about taking a side. It was about being seen as a person who can stand in rain and decide when to come inside. I thought about the stages we have stood on and the families we have built inside and outside the frame. People imagine that being in a group teaches you sameness. It doesn't. It teaches you sincerity. You learn to bring your stripe to the flag and trust that the flag needs all of them. You learn to sing your note without drowning out the chord. You learn that unity doesn't require uniformity, that love expands easier than it contracts. The members didn't ask me to be small to keep the picture neat. They widened the frame. That's how real friendship works. It doesn't fix you. It fits you. And then it grows with you when you outgrow the version of yourself that used to survive by pleasing. In the afternoon, I walked a route that doesn't belong to fans or photos, a back street with uneven bricks and a cat that pretends not to know me. The sky was the kind that threatens rain without delivering it, a tension that felt honest. If a stranger had asked for a selfie, I might have said yes. Not because I owed it, because I wanted to. That distinction matters. Consent is not just a word for headlines about the worst parts of the world. It's a word for everyday kindness. It's the line between generosity and resentment. It's the reason a smile can be real or brittle. I have given too many brittle smiles in my life. I am learning to give fewer and mean them more. By evening, the day had taken the roughest edges off the story. Not because anything was resolved, because I had practiced living with the unresolved without turning it into a wound. That's a skill you can lose if you always rush towards certainty. Uncertainty is not an enemy. It's a room you can sit in without agreeing to stay forever. I made tea and watched the window turn from a mirror into a night. Streetlights stitched gold into the dark. Somewhere across the city, my mother was probably setting down a cup for herself. Hands doing the same motions they taught me when I was small. Pour carefully, carry steadily, serve warmly. I love the person who taught me those motions. I love the person who reminds me to use them on myself. I read the messages I had ignored all day. the ones that ask for statements or confessions or corrections. The temptation to explain my life as if explanation were salvation flared and then faded. I could draft something that would gather a million approvals and still feel like I had left the room where my real life happens. I chose instead to write a sentence to myself and pin it where I could see it whenever the urge to convince became a storm. This was the sentence. I do not require your permission to become myself, and I do not require your disapproval to stop. There were voices in the thread that wanted to negotiate on my behalf, to turn love into a debate team assignment. I let them pass. Love is not won with points. It is not proven with a poll. It does not need footnotes to be true. It needs practice. It needs time. It needs the ordinary days where nobody is looking, and the people at the table pass the salt with a kindness that sets the tone for everything else. If I am going to build a life worth singing about, it will not be because I convinced the largest number of strangers to vote yes. It will be because I chose the smallest number of rooms where I am fully alive and then multiplied those rooms slowly until I can invite everyone I love inside without losing air. Night returned the city to its softer voice. I thought about the girl at the center of the noise. Her day had been heavier than mine because she carries both the story and the shadow cast by people who don't bother to learn the difference. I sent a message that didn't perform strength. I sent one that told the truth. Today was hard, and that is not your fault. And I am still the person I was before breakfast, and I will still be him tomorrow. I told her dinner is a place I plan to keep setting with bowls that steam and chairs that don't punish silence. I told her the door is unlocked and the key is still under the mat in case storms make hands clumsy. If there is a moral in this day, it is not slick enough to trend. It is slow enough to trust. You can love your mother and you can love your future. And you can refuse to make them fight to entertain a crowd that will leave early if the show doesn't break some. You can be grateful without becoming owned. Generous without becoming emptied. Available without becoming public property. You can walk through a city that knows your face and still keep parts of yourself unphotographed because holiness is not a costume, it is a boundary. You can listen to the people who made you and still be the person you are making. Before bed, I opened the window again. The curtain moved like the day taking its bow. Somewhere, the members were ending their own routines, in rooms that know our names better than the world does. I pictured Jimin setting an alarm he will ignore because he wakes up before it, Taehyung taking a photo of a shadow that will look like a poem in the morning, Namjoon closing a book with a finger still inside to save the thought he will need tomorrow, Yoongi walking through a beat he won't record because its only job was to keep his heart steady tonight, Hoseok aligning his shoes by the door as if to tell tomorrow it has a place to land. Seokjin washing a mug until it squeaks and then smiling at the sound like it belongs in a song. I thought about how love looks in small acts and how those acts are the architecture that keeps a person from collapsing when opinions lean on the walls. I lay down not because the day had surrendered, but because I had decided not to fight it on terms that make me smaller. Sleep is a vote for tomorrow. It's a way of saying, I intend to wake up and keep choosing the center over the noise, the practice over the pose, the relationship over the rumor. If morning brings more headlines, I will cook. If messages demand verdicts, I will dance until the body reminds the mind that truth can be counted in eights. If the city asks for a smile, I will give one, or none at all. And if my mother calls, I will answer with the same sentence I found over soup and quiet. I love you, and I love her, and those two truths are not enemies unless we make them fight. That's not defiant. That's a blueprint. That's a gate with a hinge that swings for kindness and holds for control. That's the way I am choosing to walk one breath longer than I think I can into a life that belongs to the person who has to live it. Morning stretch into a day that wouldn't pick a side. The light undecided, the sky practicing the art of holding back. I moved through the apartment like someone trying not to wake a sleeping animal inside his chest. There are days when you can feel the shape of a decision before you can name it, and it follows you from room to room like steam from a kettle. I folded a hoodie I didn't need to fold, wiped a spotless counter, tighten laces that were already tight. I wasn't stalling. I was rehearsing care so I wouldn't forget to offer it when the moment asked for courage. Sometimes that's all courage, is care that refuses to sit down. My mother texted early. A sentence the size of a fingernail. Are you eating? It's her way of saying everything at once without saying the one thing we're both avoiding. I stared at the dots, typed and deleted, typed and deleted. I sent a photo of soup in a white bowl, like a calm lake, even though the pot was still cold. It wasn't a lie. It was a promise to the next hour. While the water heated, I tried to hear her voice under the text. The voice that taught me to finish what I started and not to confuse disagreement with disrespect. Disagreement is two hands pointing to different stars. Disrespect is pretending the other hand doesn't exist. The difference matters, especially when the person across from you gave you the hands in the first place. The studio called me again, not as escape, as witness. Floors, remember what you choose on them. I needed to choose something I could love later. I set the metronome low. Let it count for me the way a lighthouse counts waves. My body is in a courtroom. It's a diary. It tells the truth with angles and breath. I let it write. The first passes were messy, because honesty always is when you stop polishing it for company. Then a phrase appeared 1/8 count that felt like walking through a crowd without shrinking. Shoulders open, gaze steady. Steps that said, I know where I'm going and I'm not apologizing for it. I looped it until the floor knew my name again. Jimin arrived like an exhale. He didn't bring answers, he brought timing. We learned a long time ago that timing serves love better than certainty. He crossed the room and stood behind me. Our reflections stacked like a memory we'd visited 1,000 times and were still surprised to find whole. He kept the music where it was and tapped my shoulder on the third count. A soft drumstick on skin, a reminder to start in the body when the mind tries to sprint to the ending. There's a gentleness he saves for the moments when I could force a solution and ruin everything. He doesn't stop me. He slows the world down until I can hear the right tempo. In that slowness, I found space for a sentence I would need later. I love you, and I'm not asking your fear for permission. Taeyong drifted in with the camera slung low and a question that looked like a grin. He pressed the shutter at nothing in particular, the corner where the sun had curled up to nap, and then showed me the shot, as if to say, see, warmth exists even when it looks like an empty wall. He told me a story about a painting that looked violent from 5 centimeters away and like a sunrise from 5 meters back. Distance is also a kind of mercy, he said. Give your mother some. He didn't mean ignore her. He meant stop reading every flinch as an attack. Stop treating worry like a verdict. He meant, let the canvas breathe so the colors can find each other. Namjoon brought a notebook without lines. He hates boxes unless they're for gifts. He sat, cap low, and listened the way he does when he's building a map out of wind. Tell me the sentence you won't betray, he said. Not the speech, just the sentence. I gave him the one I had carried from the kitchen to the studio to the space between my ribs. He nodded once, as if a door had clicked in a house I couldn't see. Then everything you say today has to be a translation of that sentence, he said. Not a negotiation, a translation. He talks like a diplomat between hearts. It helps to have one of those when your life becomes a summit no one's scheduled. Yoongi appeared with coffee and the expression he wears when he's about to delete half a song to find the heartbeat we lost under cleverness. He waved the cup at me and said, do you want to be right or do you want to be real? Sometimes those are the same. Today they were twins with different birthdays. He told me to write 3 messages. One I'd send if I were scared. One I'd send if I were performing. One I'd send if I were free. The scared one apologized for existing. The performing one was perfect and dead. The free one was short. I love her, I love you, and I'm not a tug-of-war rope. He pointed to the last one like it was a chorus he could finally loop. Hoseic arrived with a speaker small enough to fit in his hand and big enough to remind a room of its purpose. He put on a beat that didn't demand anything, just offered a sturdy place to put a foot. He clapped once the way he always does a bell to start prayer. Then he said something that stuck. Smile only if it belongs to you. It wasn't advice for cameras. It was advice for dinner tables. Don't perform peace you didn't earn. Don't promise comfort you can't deliver. Don't wear your mother's relief like armor and call it love. It's hard to be that honest without sounding cruel. But honesty said gently is not cruelty. It's respect. Jungkook texted from a grocery store aisle a photo of green onions with a caption that read, "Buy more. You'll need them." He's right about soup and life more often than seems fair. He knows that food is how you forgive a day for being complicated. How you signal to the people you love that you expect them to stay long enough to be hungry again. He told me to drop off a container even if I didn't go inside a peace offering. That wasn't an apology. Feed the conversation, he wrote, not the conflict. By noon, I had the courage to drive. Not toward victory, toward proximity. I wasn't arriving to win. I was arriving to be seen. The route to my parents' place is muscle, memory, and prayer. Every stoplight on that road has watched me grow up in the driver's seat. From the kid practicing eye contact with the horizon to the man who knows how to hold a straight line even when the crosswinds try to show off. I parked one house away and walked the sidewalk like it might tell me a secret if I was quiet enough. The door opened before I knocked. Mothers do not need doorbells. They hear your footsteps the way the sea hears the moon. Her eyes held everything I expected and something I didn't. Relief. It threw me for a second, like stepping onto a stair that isn't where you thought it was. Relief says, I was lost in a maze and I found an exit I didn't build. She moved aside the way people do when they want to say you are welcome, and I'm not sure how to make this safe for both of us. The house smelled like the past and the present, arguing gently soy sauce and detergent, and the citrus of a candle we both pretend is for the air, and know is actually for the nerves. We sat where we've always sat to solve what cannot be solved in one afternoon. Across a table that has held report cards and birthday cakes in the silence of hard seasons. She asked about sleep and work and the things people ask when the real question is heavy and delicate and sharp. I answered honestly. Not exhaustively. Exhaustive truth can be a kind of violence if you drop it without cushioning. I waited until the kettle clicked, until water met leaves, until steam softened the air. Then I set down my sentence between us like a dish you can serve without anyone burning their hand. I love her, I love you, and I am not a tug-of-war rope. The room did not clap. The house did not spin. She looked at me with the face that raised me, the face that can hold joy and fear without blinking. She said she was afraid of losing the boy who used to ask for one more story after lights out. The boy who traced the pattern in the curtain and named it a river. She said she couldn't read this girl's map yet, and maps matter when you're sending your son into weather. She said the internet makes strangers judges, and she wanted to keep me in a place no one could reach. She didn't say hate, she said lost. Sometimes people say hate when they mean lost, because lost is an admission and hate is a shield. I told her about the person I am when I'm with the woman at the center of the storm. Not a resume, a mirror, softer with myself. Clearer about the difference between rest and running away. Better at closing the laptop before midnight and calling the people I love before the day eats the chance. I told her about laughter that arrives without permission and stays until my shoulders forget. They used to live near my ears. I told her about a quiet that isn't heavy, a quiet that heals. I told her about the version of her that I carry into that room, a son who remembers how to set the table and say thank you with actions, not posts. We didn't argue policy. We traded pictures. Hers was of a cliff edge with wind. Mine was of a path with railings and a view. The cliff and the path might be the same place depending on how close you stand and what you've survived. She admitted that once, years ago, she ignored a feeling and it cost her a season of repair. She swore never to ignore that feeling again. That oath saved her then, but it might be punishing me now. Promises made to fear are expensive even when they worked once upon a time. We agreed to move that oath to a different shelf. Still honored, no longer in charge. My father entered like a page turn, calm and necessary. He put down a plate of sliced fruit, the universal sign for we are a family, not a panel. He didn't try to translate us for each other. He asked me if I'd eaten, which in his language means I see you alive and I plan to keep you that way. He nodded at my sentence the way you nod at a beam that refuses to sag under the roof. Carry it with 2 hands, he said. People will try to take it from you when they're tired. He glanced at my mother and added, sometimes we are those people. Relief and pain crossed her face like 2 birds changing trees. She didn't argue. She took a slice for herself. There was a moment when the old choreography reached for us, the one where I shrink to fit the space that needs me small, the one where she grows taller with worry until I feel like I have to scale her just to reach my own future. I didn't follow it. I changed the count like we do when the original arrangement can't hold the room anymore. I said no to one more revision that made me disappear. I said yes to staying long enough to be uncomfortable without surrendering. We sat in that strange new count until it felt like music and not punishment. On the drive back, the city didn't look different. I did. The phone was a billboard for strangers' feelings again. Easy to read and easier to misread. I turned it face down, not because I was hiding, because I was preserving the small flame. I just kept alive in a room that has seen too many drafts of me trying to be acceptable. The word hate followed me like a dog who isn't sure if it belongs to anyone. I let it. Dogs tire out. Love doesn't. At rehearsal, the members were waiting. The circle we built for days like this, holding exactly as designed. We didn't process. We practiced. The choreography that needed work today was not the one we perform on stage. It was the one I perform at home when fear knocks in a familiar voice. Jimin stood where a brother stands when you're relearning balance. Taeyong filmed a take with no sound, just movement, to prove to me how much truth a body tells without commentary. Namjoon crossed out 3 lines from the speech I thought I'd need for later and wrote one better. Let kindness speak first. Let boundaries have the final word. Yoongi lowered the tempo until the step made sense at a human speed. Hoseok clapped the room back into focus every time my attention wandered to what ifs. Seokjin brought a bag with green onions and smiled like mercy in human form. Evening tried to bargain. It offered a quieter path. Postpone, appease, reshape. I didn't bargain. I cooked. I texted my mother a photo of 2 containers labeled with the date, one for her, one for me, a bridge we could carry in our hand. I sent the woman I love a message that didn't ask for reassurance. It offered presence. I chose us today without making enemies, and I will keep choosing us tomorrow without making monuments. She replied with a voice note that sounded like a promise and a laugh that cut through the leftover weight in the room like sunlight through a curtain that's thinner than you remembered. Night came honest. No victories, no defeats. Just a bed that held its shape and a ceiling that didn't need to be stared at for hours to hold the silence. I lay awake long enough to thank the kid I used to be for teaching me how to hear the difference between fear telling me I'm reckless and love telling me I'm brave. I thank the men I make music with for letting my life be a song that includes rest, not just relentless sound. I thanked my mother for a conversation that didn't finish me off or finish the topic, only finish the habit of treating love like a courtroom where someone must lose for anyone to go home. If tomorrow brings the same headline, I will bring the same sentence. If tomorrow brings a softer voice on the other end of the phone, I will bring a chair and the kind of soup that tastes better the second day because patience had time to work. If tomorrow brings another test, I will grade it with the rubric I chose in a room with mirrors and friends and a metronome that does not care about public opinion. Be kind without disappearing. Be firm without hardening. Tell the truth without sharpening it into a weapon. And don't let anyone, including the part of me that still wants to be a perfect son, pull me back into the choreography that leaves me standing on stage while the real me waits alone in the wings. I'm not a tug-of-war rope. I'm a person building a bridge with the people I refuse to live without. Bridges don't ask the river to stop moving. They learn how to stand anyway. And tonight, while the city settles and the apartment holds the heat of a pot that did its job, I can feel the beams setting. Not because everyone agrees, but because I finally do. Afternoon slipped in like a careful guest, who doesn't sit until invited, and I felt the day looking at me as if to ask whether I was ready to turn a sentence into a calendar entry, to stop speaking in metaphors and start arranging chairs. I stood by the sink and watched the tap run as if clarity could be rinsed from metal. And when the water finally cooled my hands enough to notice my fingers, I sent 2 messages that would braid the next hours together, whether I was ready or not. To my mother, I wrote that I would stop by later with something warm. To the woman whose name lives in my chest like a steady drum, I wrote that maybe today is the day we let kindness meet courage at the same table. Neither message was dramatic. Neither promised a miracle. They were doors, not demands. They were the first good step after all the good words. I carried the phone to the studio because rooms that know your sweat also know how to keep you honest. The floor greeted me with that quiet welcome that feels like a hand on your back. It doesn't push. It reminds you you're not walking alone. The mirror held my face without commentary. I let the metronome decide what my pulse couldn't, and counted the way a lighthouse counts the dark. 4 for breath, 4 for truth. 4 for the boundary that lets love in without letting fear drive. When the beat settled, the door clicked and the members entered like the rest of the sentence arriving to complete the thought. Jimin read the room faster than I could and tuned the music to a volume that felt like a heartbeat you can hear without flinching. He stood beside me rather than across from me, and it changed the shape of the air. There's a science to companionship that has nothing to do with advice. It's proximity calibrated to the person you are right now. Not the person you were yesterday or the person they want you to be tomorrow. He tapped my shoulder on the 3rd count again, and I heard what the gesture means when you're about to do something hard. Start from the body. It remembers how to move through rooms your mind still thinks are locked. Taehyung had a camera around his neck and a picture in his pocket. He always does, even when he doesn't. He showed me a photo of an old door with chipped paint and a brass handle polished by years of careful hands. It's still beautiful, he said, because it was used with love. Sometimes he gives you a parable with 10 words and then leaves you to find the moral while he hums the melody. No one else can hear yet. I knew what he meant. This meeting would not be shiny. It would be worn and real and precious for exactly that reason. Namjoon opened a notebook with no lines and drew a circle in the middle of the page, then a smaller circle inside it, then a path between them. Don't aim at agreement, he said. Aim at understanding. Agreement might follow, it might not. Understanding is the bridge you can walk on even when the weather changes. He added that I didn't have to prove I was right to anyone at that table today. I only had to prove I could be real without turning realness into a weapon. I nodded because sometimes the only way to hold onto a sentence is to say it with your neck. Yoongi slid his phone across the floor with 3 drafts on the screen, mirrors of the ones he had asked me to write yesterday. The scared version of tonight's conversation, the performing version, and the free one. He had deleted most of the first 2 and circled the 3rd like a chorus. Leave room for silence, he said. Silence is where people decide whether they are listening or waiting to speak. He says it like he's talking about mixing levels, but he's talking about mercy. The tracks stack better when you give each sound the space to be itself. Hoseok brought the sun with him in a little black speaker and clapped the moment into existence. He didn't choreograph my courage. He put a beat under it. Choose steps you can repeat, he said. That's how performances become lives. He laughed and the laugh folded the edges of my fear into a shape that could be carried without spilling. Seokjin appeared with a bag that looked like every healing I've ever eaten. Green onions, garlic, stock, the patient alchemy of heat. He pressed the container into my hands like a benediction. Deliver this, he said, and deliver your sentence. No more, no less. The drive to my parents' place felt like walking through a song I've known since I was a child, but was only now learning to understand. Every landmark held a younger version of me. The street where I leaned my head against the window after long practices. The corner store where I bought snacks for nights that refused to end. The crosswalk where I once promised myself I would never let success turn me into something I couldn't recognize in a mirror. The promises we make alone in cars matter. They're the ones that don't need applause to survive. I parked one house down because ritual steadies the heart. The door opened before I knocked, not because my mother is always waiting, because she listens for the sound of her life, returning to her in footsteps she knows by weight. Her face carried the weather of the last few days. Clouds, light, the threat of rain, the stubborn miracle of blue pushing through. She saw the container in my hand and stepped back. Not because soup needs space, because conversations do. The living room looked exactly the way the past looks when it refuses to be only memory. Glass table, framed photos of days when everything felt simpler by virtue of being smaller. A blanket folded with the care of someone who believes even fabric deserves gentleness. We didn't sit right away. My father took the soup to the kitchen and made clinking noises that mean I'm here and I'm going to be useful. Small noises are a language in this house. Tea kettles, cabinet doors, a drawer that sticks and requires patience. My mother asked if I would like slippers. I said I would like honesty. We both smiled because we are not enemies. We are mirrors trying to find the angle where the light doesn't blind. When the doorbell rang, the house inhaled. I felt it in the floorboards, the quiet attention a home gives when it knows something important is approaching on 2 feet. She stepped in the way she steps into every room she respects, with eyes that notice before they announce, with hands that know how to carry nervousness without spilling it on other people's shoes. She greeted my parents with the kind of bow that contains both history and hope, and my mother's return bow contained both caution and courtesy. That is a kind of progress, even when it doesn't look like one on the internet. A courtesy that refuses to become coldness is a mercy. We sat at the table that remembers birthdays and heavy silences and long laughter and everything in between. No one delivered speeches. We built a meal out of short sentences. My father ladled soup and said, "It's hot," which means, be careful with your mouth and your heart. My mother asked if she would like more rice, which means I can still take care of something, even if it's small. The woman I loved thanked her for the bowl with a voice that knew the difference between performing sweetness and offering respect. I watched my mother watch her the way you do when you're reading not just words but tone, posture, history, and 1,000 unnamed things we learn to recognize being human in families. I didn't rush to name the elephant because sometimes the elephant is a memory of a stampede, and if you pet it like a dog, it will calm down. I waited until steam thinned and bowls lightened, and the room remembered that it has held more tenderness than trouble. Then I placed the sentence everyone had arrived to weigh. I love her. I love you. I am not a tug-of-war rope. The words didn't echo. They landed. My mother looked at them the way you look at a family heirloom you didn't know. You owned, surprised, guarded, maybe a little relieved to recognize the workmanship. I am afraid, she said, and didn't dress the fear up as anger this time. I am afraid of losing you to a room I cannot enter. She didn't mean fame. She meant a life that does not require her to be necessary. The woman I love said that necessity and love are not the same. I don't want him to need me to breathe, she said. I want him to want me when he can breathe just fine. She said it with the steadiness that announced no appetite for winning, only a deep hunger for truth. My father cleared his throat, which in his language means, your mother. And I fought this fight with the world and with ourselves and with our own parents, and we survived because we learned which parts of love could stretch without tearing. He didn't offer a history lesson. He offered a slice of orange and a look that said, keep going. We drew maps without drawing them. My mother described the places she can travel without getting lost. Family dinners, holidays, the quiet ritual of tea after long days. The woman I love described the places she hopes to build with me. Mornings that aren't content meals. Afternoons where saying no to noise is considered an achievement. Evenings where we make food that tastes like patience. I described the bridge between those places. Soup in labeled containers, chairs kept warm for arrivals that might be tentative, music low enough for conversation and loud enough to remind us We can still dance if the room needs loosening. We agree that control is not love dressed in a responsible outfit. Control is fear trying to do the job love is built for. We agreed to let love do its job and to let fear sit on a chair by the door with a blanket and a cup of something warm so it doesn't wander the halls making up stories. There were moments when the air thinned. My mother asked a question that sounded like a verdict if you weren't listening for the heartbeat underneath. What happens when the world turns on you? She said, as if the world hadn't already tried. The woman I love said, then we close the window, leave the light on, and eat soup. It was not a slogan. It was a plan at human scale. My mother nodded as if she recognized the plan from a time before I could write my own name. She still didn't say the words. I know some people would have scripted for this scene approval stamped like a passport, but she handed another bowl across the table without flinching at whose hands would hold it. And sometimes that's how a country opens its borders. When we stood, the house exhaled. The shoes by the door remembered their owners. My father packed leftovers with the practical tenderness of someone who believes food solves nothing and helps with everything. My mother walked us to the threshold and touched my shoulder with the same gesture she used when I was small and heading into rain. Not to stop me, to bless the path. She looked at the woman I love and said that her door is not locked, which in her language means, bring your storms and your sunshine, and I will learn how to host both without trying to rearrange the sky. Outside, evening had decided to be kind. The streetlight made a gold halo out of nothing in particular. The walk to the car was short enough to feel safe and long enough to let relief catch up. In the driver's seat, I didn't reach for the radio. I wanted to hear the quiet work of the heart settling into a rhythm it could keep. She reached across the console and took my hand without squeezing, the way you hold something you intend to keep without proving it by pressure. You did well, she said. We did, honestly, I answered. Honesty is the only victory that doesn't beg to be photographed. Back at rehearsal, the members didn't ask for a report. They watched the way my shoulders had migrated away from my ears and filed it under progress. Jimin played a track that felt like walking home through a city that now knows your name for the right reason. He stayed behind me again and set his breathing to mine. A duet without note. Taeyong filmed a single minute of me moving with no music, a study in balance, then showed it to me as if to say, look, your body believes you. Namjoon tossed the notebook with its 2 circles in the air and caught it. A magician satisfied that the trick has become truth.